Ryan Thomas with EastWest here, and welcome to the new instrument walkthrough for EastWest Silk, a selection of meticulously sampled instruments from the Far East. And I really enjoyed making this video. It reminded me of what EastWest Instruments are all about, and the best word that I can come up with to describe this library is just cinematic. The emotion that you feel when playing them, the depth of the articulations, and the dynamic layers. It just makes writing with them so easy and enjoyable. And even after having used EastWest Instruments extensively for the better part of a decade, they still manage to surprise me. So in this video, we are going to explore each instrument individually, but we're also going to show you how they fit into the broader EastWest ComposerCloud ecosystem with some full in-context demos. We're also going to show you how the new features of the EastWest Opus Audio Engine bring even more depth and flexibility to this already expansive set of instruments. So please join me as we embark on an epic journey to the East. So EastWest Silk is comprised of three main folders. You have instruments from the Chinese region, instruments from India, and instruments from the Persian Empire. And each instrument folder, with a couple exceptions, contains three subfolders. The elements, which are essentially individual articulations. The Keyswitch, dynamic crossfade, legato, and live patches, and the performance patches, which are essentially pre-recorded phrases and motifs. Now, in the past, if you wanted to hear what an instrument sounded like, you had to actually load it and then play it, and if it wasn't exactly what you wanted, you then had to close it out and load another instrument, and that whole process can be really time-consuming, especially when you're working with a lot of these world instruments that you might not be super familiar with. But the new Opus Player has a Audition feature that allows you to hear what an instrument sounds like without having to load it. So for example, let's say that I knew I wanted the sound of a Chinese plucked string instrument, but I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. All I have to do is click on the instrument name, and you can hear it. So now let's try the pipa. And finally, let's try the Guzheng. And this feature can be turned on or off, and you can adjust the volume. The other really cool thing about the Audition feature is that you can even audition instruments that you haven't installed or downloaded yet. And if you want to install just that single instrument without having to install the entire library, all you have to do is click on the cloud icon and it'll download and install within minutes or less. Now let's talk about the Keyswitch, dynamic crossfade, legato, and live folders, which are kind of the meat of each of these instruments. And of course, the Keyswitch patch is going to be a key switch containing most of the articulations for the instrument. So here is the Duduk, and we're just going to cycle through the first few articulations. They're just so expressive, and these first few articulations are basically giving you various lengths of note before the vibrato kicks in, and also some different depths of vibrato. Now, the dynamic crossfade patches, which are signified by the DXF in the name, are going to allow you to use the mod wheel, or CC1, to crossfade between non-vibrato and vibrato samples. So, for example, with the Dilruba, which is an absolutely beautiful instrument, You can hear the vibrato kicking in as I increase the mod wheel values. So these patches can just be really, really expressive. Now, the legato mod patches feature real legato transitions that kick in at a certain CC1 value. So values from 0 to 64 will give you a simple sustain. But then once I push those CC1 values up just a bit higher, I really love the Erhu. It's one of my favorite instruments in the collection, and you're about to hear it in one of the upcoming demos, so be listening for that. It brings so much life to that piece. Now, the live patches are similar to a Keyswitch patch, but they don't have quite as many articulations, and rather than being triggered by notes on the keyboard outside the range of the instrument, they are actually velocity sensitive. So for example, with the Guzheng Live 4, at the lower velocities, you're going to get a simple pluck. And then at the higher velocities, you'll get a tremolo. So those can be really useful, of course, when played live. And lastly, the performance patches are pre-recorded phrases that were played by the instrumentalist at the studio. And any of these that have the word mod in them will allow you to use the mod wheel to cause the phrases to start at different points. So let's check out the Bansuri, and some of these are just absolutely incredible. So, of course, these are going to contain some nuances that you can't quite get by programming with the individual articulations. And these sound really great over just simple string pads even. So now that we have covered the basic folder structure and how the articulations work, let's go ahead and go on a journey through each of the individual instruments, starting in China. So you just heard most of the Chinese instruments in context, and don't they just sound stunning with Hollywood Orchestra and Storm Drum? So let's check out each instrument individually and kind of see how they stand on their own. And I'm going to start with the Bawu here, and I am going to cycle through some of the articulations. This is the Keyswitch patch. It's just so delicate and emotional and almost childlike. Okay, here is the small dizzy. And of course, you just heard that in the previous demo. And this instrument is very bright, but it's not too ear-piercing, but it speaks really well even in a dense orchestration. And this is the large dizzy. I absolutely love the performance patch for this instrument. It's just so beautifully played and emotional. And we're going to skip the Erhu and Guzheng because we already heard those. Now, this is the Jinhu, and this is kind of similar to an Erhu, but with a little bit more grit. And the pipa, I think, is a really special instrument in this collection. It's got that very quintessential Chinese plucked string sound, and it comes with so many different articulations, and it's very flexible. I really love the tremolo with this one. And you can use the pitch wheel with a lot of these instruments to create some very convincing sounding pitch bends. And another really cool thing you can do with the pipa is to add a restrict to scale MIDI tool. And of course, these MIDI tools are new with EastWest Opus. And this is basically going to restrict all playable notes to the Dorian scale in the key of C, so you can do things like this. Now, the sheng is this beautifully unique instrument that is described as a mouth organ. So it is blown into, and it consists of a series of pipes and reeds, and it sounds kind of like an accordion. So I think that to fully appreciate it, you have to hear what's lost when you remove it from the demo that you just heard. So here it is in isolation. And here it is in context. And now let's mute it and see what happens. So yeah, it just adds such a fun and unique energy to this part, and you just lose so much when you remove it. All right, next up is the Sona, and this is a really interesting instrument that is a combination of a double reed, brass, and open-holed woodwind instrument. So because it's got those open tone holes, you can do a lot of very interesting ornamentations like note bends and things like that. So Silk comes with two different Sonas, and the first one that I'm going to play is the performance patch. I think a lot of those phrases would sound great with some storm drum underneath those. And this is the second Sona, and I'm just using the Keyswitch patch with the expressive articulation enabled. And I love the way the vibrato develops so naturally on that. Now let's check out the Zhao. And this is a really delicate, ethereal woodwind. This one also sounds really great with a delay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn that on. You can see all of my values here. Now, the yangqin is this really beautiful string instrument that is played with hammers, so it's similar to a hammered dulcimer, but it's got a much darker and ethereal sound to it. That's just beautiful. Now, let's say that you were working with a denser arrangement and that sound was just a little bit too dark for you. You can go over here in the new mix page in the Opus player and just add an EQ. And we're just going to cut some of the low mids, not by a whole lot. So again, that might work just a little bit better in a denser orchestration. All right, and finally, let's check out the Zhanghu. And I have the performance patch pulled up for this. Now, this instrument is very similar to an Erhu, but it's slightly larger, so it has a darker and richer sound to it. And this patch has some very long phrases in it, so you can really make these go a pretty long way. Okay, so we have listened to all of the instruments in the China folder. Let's go to India next. So now that you've heard most of the instruments from the India folder in context, let's start off our tour with the Bansuri. And this is a really exotic sounding wooden flute with open tone holes. Now, I have the first performance patch pulled up here, which you actually heard at the beginning of the video. But there are 6 different performance patches for this one instrument. So there are just a ton of phrases for the Bansuri. And let's say that you wanted even more of them available to you without having to create extra tracks. We're going to build a custom key switch using one of the really incredible new functionalities of the Opus player. So let's drag in a couple more of these performance patches, and then we're going to go over here to the perform page, and we are going to create a group, and we're going to make sure that all of these are assigned to the same group. And then for this parameter, I'm just going to select key switch. We're going to make this C0. We're going to make this one C#0. And then we're going to make this one D0. And now? And the articulation mapping features in Opus are just so powerful because you don't just have to use key switches. You can also use controller switches or velocity switches. So I'm going to go ahead and set all of these to respond to CC73. And now watch as Opus cycles between these patches as I move the slider. So the sky really is the limit when it comes to articulation mapping in Opus. Next up is the breath, and this is a really cool texture to add to your percussion tracks. And here is the Dilruba, which you heard at the beginning of the video, but we're going to explore some of the other articulations like the ornamentations and bends. And next up is the sarod. Now, this is a lute-like instrument that has a very metallic quality to it that really tends to cut through a mix, but in a very ear-pleasing way. And finally, we have the tanpura. And this instrument, I think, is very emblematic of the Indian musical ethos. It's got a very recognizable sound. You'll probably be able to identify it instantly. So, those are all the instruments from the India region. Let's move on to our final destination, which is the Persian Empire. So as you just heard, there are some really stunning instruments in the Persian Empire collection, and if you go back and listen to the demo, notice that a lot of those instruments are very exposed. They're not being layered with anything, and I think you can afford to do that if you are working with very convincing virtual instruments like these. So let's start off our tour with the 30-piece string section. Now this is just a regular string section, but it's been tuned in a very specific way, and it's being played in a very specific style. And this is the legato patch. Those just have a really bold sound to me. All right, let's check out the Duduk. Now, I know that we already heard this one close to the beginning of the video, but I wanted to show you one more thing that you can do with it. And this is the key switch patch, and I have the expressive fast articulation triggered. And of course, that's very beautiful, but I think the Duduk really shines with a delay. Man, that is just a joy to play. Speaking of instruments that are a joy to play, this is the electric cello, and I'm just going to let the sound speak for itself. This is the legato patch. Next up is the Kemençe, and this is a bowed instrument with a really lyrical quality to it, kind of similar to an Erhu, but with a little bit more grit and edge to the sound. Now, one thing I really like to do with this one is to add an amp emulator. So let's go ahead and choose the Legend amp. And I already have a preset that I made for this. You can see all my settings here if you want to recreate that. So now, so that can be really fun when you're going for just a little bit of a different take on this texture. Now, the ney flute featured quite prominently in the demo that you heard at the beginning of this section, but that was the key switch patch, and I think I had a sustain articulation triggered. So I wanted to go ahead and play one of the performance patches for you because I love these pre-recorded phrases for the ney flute. So I think a lot of those would sound really cool with a percussion loop from Storm Drum. Next up is the kanun, and this is one of my absolute favorite instruments in Silk. I use this one extensively because it's very, very versatile. And this is a stringed instrument that is similar to a dulcimer, but rather than being played with hammers, it's played with metal fingerpicks. And one thing I find myself doing quite often is layering ostinato strings with the kanun, because it can help give them a little bit more edge and bite, but the effect has to be really subtle. So I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But here is the kanun. Now, because this is played with metal finger picks, it's got that sort of metallic ring to it. And I think in my experience, it can often overwhelm a mix. So what I like to do is add a MIDI compressor, and that is just going to keep those velocities from getting too high. And I already have a setting that I've made for it, so we're just going to restore that. So now here it is with the MIDI compressor. So that MIDI compressor is going to help tame those velocities, and I really, really love this instrument at the lower dynamics. And the last instrument that we will be exploring in this video is the tar, which is a lute-like instrument that also has a somewhat metallic quality to the sound like the qanun, but I think the tar is a little bit more bold. And that is the end of our journey through Silk. I hope you had a really good time, and I want to remind you that all of the instruments and reverbs that were used in this video come with a ComposerCloud Plus subscription. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.